experience, and it can drain the life out of you. Maybe you know someone right now going through this. There's lots of useful information in this next piece that you can pass on. Pay close attention to the part on identity theft. It's getting to be a huge problem, and you really need to protect yourself from this. Be careful who you give sensitive information to, such as your social security number or your driver's license number.
A FICO score has something to do with insurance or probably threatening something.
Whenever your money gets thrown away.
Someone's credit score. The FICO is the name of the company that develops the score.
Your, how good your behavior is in terms of credit on your card, your credit cards? Yes, maybe.
FICO score is your credit score. Your credit score is determined by how you pay your debts. If you don't have any debts, you don't have a FICO score. If you never have any debts, you don't have a FICO score. I don't have a FICO score because I haven't borrowed money in 20 years. So I don't have a FICO score. So it's not bad to not have a FICO score, and our culture will tell you, people will tell you all the time, build up your credit, build up your credit, build up your credit. There's only one way to do that. It's to go into debt and pay it well so that you have the opportunity to go further in debt. This is a dumb idea. So no, don't go out worshiping at the altar of the great FICO. It's a bad idea.
Please welcome nationally syndicated radio host and New York Times best-selling author, Ramsey.
All right, let's look at one more myth. You need to take out a credit card or a car loan to build your credit score. How many of you ever heard you need to build up your credit? Go in debt so you can build up your credit. That's a myth, and let's talk about it. The truth is that the FICO score is really, when you analyze it carefully, an I love debt score. And it's not a measure of winning financially. Having a big FICO score does not mean you're winning financially. As a matter of fact, it often means just the opposite. And let's talk about why. I'll tell you how I got into this mess. I was on the early show on CBS doing a regular series of appearances, and one of my Tuesday morning appearances, I decided I was going to talk about the FICO score, and I pulled up the mathematics from myfico.com, the algorithm that is used to produce your FICO score, and the components that enter into producing your FICO score. And every one of them had something to do with debt, and I said, well, this is an I love debt score. And of course, I went on the television. I said, don't worry about your FICO score. Don't worship at the altar of the great FICO. It's an I love debt score. The only way to have a FICO score is go in debt and stay in debt a long time. And of course, being on CBS, the FICO people didn't like me saying that. Can you imagine? And so they called my director of publicity and said, we want to come on Dave's radio show and talk to him about this. He's wrong. And she said, no, you really don't. You just think you do. So let's look at what a FICO score really looks like. 35% of how your FICO score is determined is based on your debt history. That's pretty amazing. 30% is based on your debt levels. If your level of debt gets too high, your FICO score is harmed. If your level of debt gets too low, your FICO score starts to go away. Pretty amazing. 15% is based on the length of time you've been in debt. And 10% of your FICO score is based on the type of your debt. And of course, 10% is based on new debt. It's an I love debt score. The only way you can have a FICO score is to go in debt and stay in debt continually, pay it perfectly, and the more you stay in debt and the more you pay it perfectly without getting too much debt, but never having none, your FICO score continues to grow. It's the only way to have a high FICO score. So I got thinking, I haven't borrowed money in a couple of decades. I wonder what my FICO score is. So we went to myfico.com and we pulled it. I got this answer from myfico.com. Our apologies, an error has occurred. regret that we were unable to fill your score power order request because your credit report does not currently contain enough information to meet the minimum scoring criteria to calculate a FICO score. You don't have a FICO score. It gets better. In order for a FICO score to be calculated, a report must contain at least one account which has been open for 6 months or more, at least one account which has been updated in the past 6 months, and no indication of being deceased. You must be dead if you don't have a FICO score. Now, I'm not bragging or anything, and I don't want you to take this wrong, but Sharon and I have been living like no one else, and I've told you, now we're able to... And so we're not just millionaires, we're multimillionaires. And I'm not bragging, I'm a regular guy, but God has really blessed us. And so here's the situation in our culture today. If I drive down the street down here and rent an apartment, if I wanted to move in a little $500 a month apartment, and I went in there to rent it, and the little property manager in her 20s or in his 20s is not allowed to make a decision without following certain procedures and checking in with the home office, right? And they have to pull your credit bureau, don't they? They have to look at your FICO score, don't they? Say yes. Yes. I couldn't rent an apartment there. I could write a check and buy the whole complex, but I couldn't rent an apartment there. How absurd is this plan? And yet everywhere you watch on television, build your FICO score, the great FICO, 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 FICO. This is a myth that has got to end. You can inherit $10 million today, your FICO score won't change 1 point. Your boss could walk in today and give you a raise to $1 million a year income this morning, and your FICO score won't change 1 point unless you go into debt having used that money. Isn't that interesting? It is not a sign of winning. Don't worship at the altar of the great FICO. You're listening to the Dave Ramsey Show. Common sense for your dollars and cents. Next up is Brenda in Grand Rapids. Hey, Brenda, welcome to the Dave Ramsey Show. How can we help today?
Hey, Dave. Hey, I just graduated from college and they're got a great job in Dallas. I'm going to be moving down. I don't want to rent for very long, but I don't have credit cards and I'm really concerned about how I'm going to get a mortgage without building my credit.
Ooh, that is a great question, and I'm glad you asked it before you fell into the trap that most people fall into, and that's worshiping at the altar of the great FICO. The FICO score. I have to have my FICO to be able to win. And a lot of people go out and run up credit cards and buy a car loan and use the fact I'm building my credit as the rationalization for doing that. Dumb idea. So a really good question on your part. The way you do it is very simple. If you pay your landlord early or on time when you move to Dallas for about a year and you save up a good down payment and you're steady on your job, you can get a mortgage with a 0 FICO score. All you have to do is go to a mortgage company that does manual underwriting, meaning they look at the human being involved. They don't just look at the number, the FICO number. And so they'll look at the fact you have a job, that you have a good down payment. They'll look at your income to payment ratios. It's the way mortgages used to be done back in the old days. And so you'll be able to do it, but you just got to go to a manual underwriting mortgage company and do not allow them, due to the fact you don't have a FICO score, to force you into a balloon payment or an ARM mortgage or a subprime higher interest. You qualify for as good a mortgage as someone with a big FICO score, only you didn't have to go into debt to do it. And so that's the direction to go. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, thanks. That's great news. Thanks a lot, Dave.
Hey, thanks for the call. This is the Dave Ramsey Show, teaching you to live on less than you make, a concept Congress can't grasp. Look at credit bureaus because we do want to control our electronic reputation as best we can. My credit bureau report these days, as you can tell, has nothing on it because anything that's old drops off of there. Let's look at how this stuff works. Your account information is removed from your credit bureau report after it is 7 years, after 7 years from the date of last activity on that account. And since I have no debt accounts that have any activity on them in the last 7 years, it's completely clean. Okay? The exception to that is if you have filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that will stay on 10 years. But everything else is going to stay on for 7 years. That's how it happens. The Chapter 7 is a 10-year stick. Everything else is 7 years from the date of last activity. Now, if you haven't paid the bill and you've got a bad debt, they may figure out a way to keep the activity going on that, okay? But just not paying it and thinking it'll go away, that's not the point. The point is, once something is old, bad credit, it will drop off as long as it's just like you paid something slow. That time 4 years ago, you paid your car payment slow when you got laid off. That's getting less and less important the older it gets. And by the time it's 7 years old, it will just completely go away. That's the point of that. The only information that can be removed legally from your credit bureau report is inaccurate information. Do not fall for credit repair scams. You cannot repair credit except if the credit has inaccurate items on it. If you've got something on there that's somebody else's account, you can have that taken off. If they've inaccurately reported your account, you can have it either corrected or removed, and we'll walk through that. But don't go paying somebody money to do this. But there are a lot of errors out there, so you need to know how to clean up inaccuracies. The Public Interest Research Group did a whole survey and a study of credit bureaus. They found 79% of credit reports contained some kind of mistake. That's a lot. And 25% of the bureau reports contained errors that were serious enough to keep you from getting a loan. Not like we're trying to get a loan, but pretty serious error, in other words. And 30% of the credit reports contained credit accounts that had been closed by the consumer, but had never been shown closed on the bureau. So you've got to look at that as well. These are vital pieces of information in a world that depends on databases. And this is your electronic reputation. 22% of the bureaus, about a fourth of them, had the mortgage on there or another loan on there twice. A duplicate. This affects you. It affects your car insurance. It affects other things as well. It affects your homeowner's insurance rates. So you've got to be managing your electronic reputation. So what do you do if you have an inaccuracy? Well, to start with, you need to check your credit report annually. You need to pull it annually. You can now pull it, according to federal law, free. The credit bureau has to give you a free report if you request it once a year. There are 3 of them: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And so if you take one free one from each of those, you could get a free report every 4 months. If you really wanted to be just like too much on top of this and didn't have a life. But I do recommend you pull something at least once a year and look at it. Because identity theft is running rampant, there's all kinds of problems, and you don't want to wait until you're about to do something and then find out, because it takes a while to clean up a mess if there's a mess on there. Now, there are sample letters at the back of this lesson, and here's what you do if you find an error. You look on your bureau and you say, oh, that says I paid that Visa bill late, I did not pay that late. And I have proof in my file that I didn't pay it late. That is an inaccurate item. Okay? And when you're looking at that, you say, okay, I'm going to send them a letter. Now, according to the Federal Fair Credit Reporting Act of 1977, recently updated, they have 30 days once you notify them that the item is inaccurate to correct the inaccuracy or completely remove the entire item. That's how that works. And so you've got to work through that process. We'll cover that in a few minutes.
Dave, I know a lot of people with bad credit who are much older than I am. And I'm just wondering, when's a good time to start checking my credit report?
Ooh, Kevin, that's a good one. Very good. Well, credit reports should be checked early and often. You ought to pull your credit report once a year once you're 18 years old. If you're 18 years old or older, or even before that, if you suspect somebody's monkeying around with your identity. Identity theft is a big problem. It's the fastest growing white-collar crime in North America today. So pulling a copy of your credit bureau report, you can do it for free once a year, and all you have to have is your social security number to do it. And it's not a bad exercise just to kind of start learning how it works at any age to pull it. But just from a when should you, certainly when you're 18 years old, and from then on pull it at least once a year. And that's not as much to be concerned about whether I'm building my credit, because I'm going to teach you to avoid debt. So I don't really care if you have a big credit or not. It doesn't matter to me because I don't want you borrowing money. And so we're not trying to build our credit. That's a myth that we talk about avoiding. But you do want to check it to make sure somebody's not monkeying around with your identity. and something hasn't popped on there. Because you could be in a roommate situation in college and somebody picks up, he goes through your stuff when you're not there, gets your social security number, gets your credit card and uses it wrong, something like that. Then all of a sudden you've got this mess on your hands and you didn't catch the fact that there was a mess because you weren't staying on top of it and monitoring it. So more than anything, remember your credit bureau report is your electronic reputation. And you want to protect your reputation. And the way you do that is you check it every so often, at least once a year. Great question. Very good. Now, what do you do if you've got identity theft? And identity theft is rampant. 15 million people this year have had their identity stolen. Their social security number, their driver's license number, their credit card number, or numbers. It is the fastest growing white collar crime in North America today. So what to do, what to do, what to do? Well, when we get to the insurance lesson, I'm going to talk about identity theft protection, which I now believe in, if you get the right kind, and I'll show you what to do with that. But if you don't have that, and if you have your identity stolen, here are the steps, and here's what you do. Because it takes the average consumer about 600 hours to clean up a mess once their identity is stolen. It's a big deal, and it's a problem. The first thing you do is you place a fraud victim alert on your credit bureau report. A fraud victim alert on your credit bureau report. And you can do that for free. You can simply go online and just report the fraud victim situation. Danger, danger. Don't anybody else pick up an account off of this name. Now, if you go ahead and do the next step, which you should do, is get a police report. If you do that and you turn in a police report to the credit bureau, they then will make that fraud victim alert permanent on your bureau. If you do not, it will only stay on 90 days. They'll leave it on there for 90 days and then they'll drop it off. If you don't get a police report showing that your identity has actually been stolen. So go get a police report if you have suspicion or proof that it's been stolen. Sadly, it's usually fairly easy to have proof because about 80% of the identities are stolen by people you know, called scum. When you steal someone's name, when you sign someone's name, it's not your name, you are by definition a criminal. You are a bank robber. This is a crime. It's criminal fraud. Go to jail time stuff. Okay? So this is it's not something you want to fool with. So when you do the police report, you got to tell the truth. It was my mother. It was my brother. It was my old roommate. It was my ex-fiance. It was this guy down at work. I mean, if you know, you got to say. Otherwise, you're participating in the fraud then. Okay, so you have to be completely clean with this process. The next thing is, remember, this is theft. When someone steals your checkbook, one time a guy threw a brick through my wife's window while she was at the gym, grabbed her purse out, and went and started writing checks on our account, signing Dave Ramsey and Sharon Ramsey's name on the checkbook. Were we liable for those checks? Yes or no? No. When they got to the bank accidentally paid one of them, the bank ate that one. The rest of them, the bank denied, and the store didn't get to collect the money. They called us, want the money. We said, we don't pay any of the money. We didn't sign the checks. A thief did that. You didn't check ID, you lost the money. That's how that works. If you'd have looked at that lady's picture, I don't think it would have looked like Sharon. It's just my thought. I don't know. And I think that's what you'd have found. So they lose their money. So when there's a theft occurs, you're not liable in this situation, so you owe nothing, and you need to pay nothing. Remember that. Because the credit card companies and some of these other people will act like you're the criminal. And you're supposed to pay. And all these bad things are going to happen to your credit if you don't pay. And that's wrong. Someone stole your identity. Open an account with Doofus Bank Incorporated over here because Doofus Bank didn't check and make sure it wasn't Toby Cocker, the Cocker Spaniel. And then they went and ran up a bill. Well, the bank is the one that got ripped off by the criminal, not you. You didn't lose any money, nor do you owe any money under the law. And don't let them bully you or push you into paying something that you don't owe. That is a big deal. The next thing you do is to contact the Fraud Victim Division of the creditor and furnish them documentation. Now sometimes when you contact the Fraud Victim Division, again, they're going to treat you like you did something wrong. Because they think you ran up the bill and just don't want to pay it and you're acting like it's fraud. And I'm sure that happens sometimes, but they treat everybody that way. And it's crazy. Customer service is two words that don't go together in the credit card world, okay? So when you go to the Fraud Victim Division, be prepared if you're the victim to be treated like the criminal. And don't be pushed into paying this stuff. And here's what you've got to do. You've just got to be persistent. You now have a new hobby. And you will fight this, and you will provide documentation, and you will fight it, and you'll provide more documentation, and then you're going to send out more letters, and then you're going to do this, and you're going to put these freezes on your bureau and these different things, and finally, eventually, it'll go away. And I'll tell you what, yeah, if it's a relative of yours, you need to take care of this. Just a thought. Now, correcting a credit report inaccuracy, like we were talking about a while ago, the 1977 Federal Fair Credit Reporting Act requires the credit bureau to remove any and all accuracies within 30 days of notification. So we notify them. We notify them with a letter. The sample letter is here in the lesson, and it just says, this item is inaccurate according to the Federal Fair Credit Reporting Act. You have 30 days to fix this item or remove it. You do not have to identify what's wrong with it. You just have to say that this item's inaccurate. Then they go to Visa, they go to the bank, they go to American Express or whoever it is, and American Express doesn't answer, they have to take the whole thing off. Now, if the lender or the creditor answers and says, oh yes, it is accurate, your beef is now not with the credit bureau, your beef is with the person reporting to the credit bureau inaccurately, and you got to go to them and dig this weed out by the root. But you can get it taken off because about most of the time, when you dispute an item, that lender will never get around to answering the dispute within 30 days, and it'll be cleansed off. It may pop back on there later when they download some databases again. But at least you got it off for that period of time, and if it keeps popping back on there, then go to the source and dig it out. That's how that's going to work. All of these letters should be sent certified mail, return receipt requested, so you can prove that they got the letter. You got the letter on June 6th, so you have till July 6th. You have 30 days. After that, I'm going to make you my new hobby. I'm going to just beat on you until you take the entire item off. I don't want to hear correspondences in the mail. You have 30 days by federal law. Cleanse it. That's it. I'm not arguing with you about this. And if you get on them like that, they'll do it. You have to be persistent. If the item isn't corrected within 30 days, you should request that they remove the entire item from your file. Get it completely out of your life. If you have complaints, you lodge those on this subject with the Federal Trade Commission.